Welcome to 6 Political Theories That Shape the World. Politics may seem complex, but understanding it doesn't have to be hard. Did you know that over 50% of people feel disconnected from politics? Yet, politics affects every part of our lives, from the price of groceries to the safety of our communities. Here's a surprising fact: the world spends over $1.9 trillion annually on military expenses. That's more than the GDP of Canada. Why do countries spend so much on defense? Realism, one of the theories we'll explore, helps explain this. Or consider this: in 2020, global cooperation helped create COVID-19 vaccines in record time. This is a great example of liberalism in action. How do countries decide to work together, and what makes them succeed or fail? Each chapter is packed with unique facts, engaging stories, and practical strategies. By the end, you'll have a clearer view of the forces shaping our world. Ready to dive in? Let's unlock the secrets of political theories and see how they shape our daily lives. Chapter 1: Power Dynamics Unveiled, Realism in Action. Welcome to the first chapter, where we dive into realism. This theory centers on power and state interests. Realism sees the world as a tough place, where countries always look out for themselves. Realism argues that states are the main players in global politics. According to realist thinkers like Hans Morgenthau, international politics, like all politics, is a struggle for power. This means that every country wants to be strong and secure. A great example of realism is the Cold War. The USA and the USSR were both superpowers, always trying to outdo each other. They built huge arsenals of nuclear weapons, showing off their power. Realists believe that human nature is selfish. They think leaders will always act in their own country's best interest. This often leads to competition and conflict. Realism also talks about the balance of power. This idea is that countries will form alliances to prevent any one state from becoming too powerful. Think of NATO during the Cold War, balancing the power of the Soviet Union. Realists are skeptical about international organizations like the United Nations. They believe that these organizations can't stop powerful states from doing what they want. They point out that major wars and conflicts still happen, despite the existence of the UN. Realism isn't just about war and conflict, though. It's also about strategy. Countries use diplomacy and negotiations to get what they want. But they always have their military power in the background as a backup. Realists often reference the ancient Greek historian Thucydides. He wrote about the Peloponnesian War, saying, "The strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must." This sums up the realist view of international politics. In today's world, realism is still very relevant. Look at the tensions between the US and China. Both countries are competing for influence and power, just like in the Cold War. They engage in trade wars, build military bases, and form alliances. Chapter 2: The Web of Influence, Liberalism and Global Cooperation. Now, let's move to liberalism. This theory is all about cooperation and working together. Liberalism believes that states can achieve more by collaborating than by competing. Liberalism highlights the role of international organizations. Institutions like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization are central to this theory. These organizations help countries solve problems and avoid conflicts. One key figure in liberalism is John Locke. He believed in the idea of natural rights and that governments should protect these rights. This idea influences how liberal states interact with each other, promoting democracy and human rights. Liberalism emphasizes economic cooperation. Trade agreements like NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, are examples. These agreements show how countries can benefit economically by working together. A fascinating aspect of liberalism is its focus on democracy. Liberal theorists argue that democratic countries are less likely to go to war with each other. This is known as the democratic peace theory. Liberalism also values human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN in 1948, is a testament to liberal ideals. It outlines the basic rights and freedoms that every person should have. One unique fact about liberalism is its success in creating a relatively peaceful period in Europe. After World War II, European countries formed the European Union, promoting peace and cooperation. The EU has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts. In terms of strategy, liberalism relies heavily on diplomacy and negotiation. Countries work through international bodies to resolve disputes and create agreements. This is in stark contrast to the realist focus on power and military might. Liberalism also addresses global issues like climate change. The Paris Agreement is a prime example of liberal cooperation. Countries came together to set targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, showing how collective action can address global challenges. Chapter 3: Invisible Chains, Marxism and Class Struggle. Welcome to Chapter 3, where we explore Marxism. This theory focuses on the struggles between classes. Karl Marx, the founder of Marxism, argued that society is divided into the bourgeoisie, the rich, and the proletariat, the working class. Marxism says that the rich exploit the workers. The bourgeoisie owns the means of production, factories, land, and capital, while the workers sell their labor for wages. Marx famously wrote in The Communist Manifesto, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." One of the main strategies in Marxism is revolution. Marx believed that the proletariat would rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie. This would lead to a classless society where everyone shares resources equally. A historical example of Marxism in action is the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the Russian monarchy and established a socialist state. This event had a huge impact on global politics and inspired other revolutions. Marxism also emphasizes the role of ideology. It argues that the ruling class uses ideology to maintain control. For instance, ideas like meritocracy and individualism can justify inequality and prevent workers from seeing their true interests. In the modern world, Marxism has evolved. Neo-Marxism addresses new forms of exploitation, such as cultural and digital capitalism. This perspective highlights how media and technology can perpetuate class divisions. One unique fact about Marxism is its influence on social justice movements. Concepts like economic inequality and workers' rights have roots in Marxist theory. Today, movements like Occupy Wall Street draw on Marxist ideas to critique economic disparities. In terms of strategy, Marxism advocates for collective action. Workers are encouraged to unite and form unions. By organizing, they can demand better wages, working conditions, and social reforms. Interestingly, Marxism also focuses on internationalism. Marxists believe that workers around the world share common interests. This idea led to the creation of international organizations like the Communist International, Comintern, which aim to promote global revolution. A significant aspect of Marxism is its critique of capitalism. Marxists argue that capitalism is inherently unstable and leads to crises. They believe that these crises create opportunities for revolutionary change. In today's context, Marxism helps us understand economic issues like the gig economy and income inequality. It provides a framework for analyzing how wealth and power are distributed in society. By highlighting the conflicts between different classes, Marxism reveals the underlying dynamics of economic and political systems. Chapter 4: Balancing ACTs, the Art of Constructivism. Welcome to Chapter 4, where we delve into constructivism. This theory emphasizes the power of ideas, beliefs, and identities in shaping international relations. Unlike realism and liberalism, constructivism focuses on how social constructs influence political behavior. One key concept in constructivism is the role of norms. Norms are shared expectations about appropriate behavior. For example, the norm against using nuclear weapons has shaped international policies and prevented their use since World War II. Constructivist thinkers like Alexander Wendt argue that anarchy is what states make of it. This means that the international system is not inherently chaotic, it is shaped by the interactions and beliefs of states. States can create a more peaceful or more conflictual world based on their actions and perceptions. Identity is another crucial element in constructivism. National identities influence how countries see themselves and others. For instance, the European Union promotes a shared European identity to foster cooperation among member states. One interesting fact about constructivism is its focus on the role of non-state actors. Organizations like Greenpeace and Amnesty International influence international norms and policies. These actors shape global issues like environmental protection and human rights through advocacy and activism. Constructivism also examines the impact of language and discourse. The way leaders talk about issues can shape public perceptions and policy decisions. For example, framing climate change as a crisis rather than a challenge can mobilize stronger action. In terms of strategy, constructivism emphasizes the importance of dialogue and communication. By engaging in conversations and negotiations, states and non-state actors can build shared understandings and find common ground. A unique example of constructivism in action is the transformation of Germany after World War II. Through a process of re-education and international cooperation, Germany shifted from a militaristic state to a leading advocate for peace and democracy in Europe. Constructivism also helps us understand the dynamics of regional organizations. The African Union, for instance, promotes a Pan-African identity to encourage unity and cooperation among African countries. Interestingly, constructivism highlights the role of historical narratives. How countries interpret their history can influence their foreign policy. For example, China's emphasis on its century of humiliation shapes its approach to international relations, seeking to restore its perceived rightful place in the world. Chapter 5: Hidden Agendas, the Mysteries of Political Psychology. Welcome to Chapter 5, where we dive into political psychology. This theory explores how human behavior and mental processes influence politics. It's about understanding the psychological factors behind political decisions. Political psychology examines cognitive biases. These are mental shortcuts that can lead to errors in judgment. For example, confirmation bias makes people favor information that supports their beliefs. This can influence how politicians and voters process information. Emotions play a huge role in politics. Fear, anger, and hope can shape political outcomes. For instance, fear can lead to support for authoritarian policies, while hope can drive movements for change. George Lakoff, a cognitive linguist, argues that emotions are central to the reasoning process. Personality traits also impact political behavior. Studies show that people with high openness are more likely to support progressive policies, while those with high conscientiousness lean towards conservatism. Understanding these traits can help predict voting patterns. Political psychology uses experiments to study behavior. One famous study is the Stanford Prison Experiment, which showed how quickly people conform to roles of authority and submission. Though controversial, it highlights the power of situational factors in politics. Strategically, political psychology can help in campaign planning. By understanding voter behavior, campaigns can tailor their messages. For example, framing a policy in a way that resonates emotionally with voters can increase support. A unique fact about political psychology is its use of neuroimaging. Researchers use brain scans to study how people react to political information. This helps in understanding the neural basis of political beliefs and attitudes. Political leaders often use psychological tactics. Propaganda is a classic example. It manipulates emotions and perceptions to influence public opinion. During World War II, both the Allies and Axis powers used propaganda to rally support. Public opinion is another key area. Politicians and analysts use polls to gauge public sentiment. They then adjust their strategies based on these insights. This shows the practical application of understanding voter psychology. Chapter 6: The Technological Frontier, Digital Politics and Cyber Warfare. Welcome to Chapter 6, where we explore digital politics and cyber warfare. This area looks at how technology shapes political strategies and conflicts. In today's digital age, it's more relevant than ever. Digital politics includes the use of social media in campaigns. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook have become crucial tools for politicians. They use these platforms to connect with voters, spread their message, and mobilize support. Data analytics is a key strategy in digital politics. Campaigns collect and analyze voter data to target specific groups with tailored messages. This approach was famously used by Barack Obama's campaign in 2008 and 2012, revolutionizing political campaigning. Cyber warfare involves using technology to attack other countries. This can include hacking government systems, stealing information, or disrupting infrastructure. The Stuxnet virus, which targeted Iran's nuclear program, is a notable example. One unique aspect of cyber warfare is its anonymity. Cyber attacks can be hard to trace, making it difficult to hold attackers accountable. This creates a new kind of threat in international relations. Social media algorithms play a big role in shaping political discourse. They determine what content users see, often creating echo chambers. This can reinforce existing beliefs and polarize societies. Disinformation campaigns are another strategy. These involve spreading false information to influence public opinion. Russia's interference in the 2016 US election, involving fake news and social media manipulation, is a prominent example. Cybersecurity is now a major concern for governments. They invest heavily in protecting their digital infrastructure. In 2020, the global cybersecurity market was valued at $156.5 billion, highlighting its importance.